every single coffee that comes through this roastery, whether it's a sample that I'm evaluating for purchase, something that comes in that I'm profiling through to get ready for production, if it's a production roast that I am evaluating for QC, or one of the many, many, many other coffees that I bring in from other roasters, they're all getting made with this one recipe, and I call that the Gabi standard recipe. This is the Gabi Master A. It has an upper reservoir that you pour your water into, a very small hole at the bottom that feeds into this bottom reservoir, which has a dispersion screen on the bottom. And that all feeds into the filter basket, which itself then has its own flow control on the bottom. It goes down into your server. This takes a Kalita 155 filter. Overall, this device is very high clarity, and it's very low agitation and low bypass. It's incredibly consistent from brew to brew, which is why I use it as an evaluation tool. It takes the mechanics out of the equation, and by doing it the same way every time and just repeating that over and over again across all coffees that I come across, I can kind of remove the mechanics and maybe issues of brewing from the equation, and I can think about the coffees themselves a little bit more. And that's sort of important to note here, is that I'm using this as an evaluation tool. This is not necessarily the best recipe to taste any particular given coffee, because I don't really change any variables with it. I have all my variables locked. Now, it is great, certainly, for some coffees, and I would classify all those coffees as being ultralight. So H&S ultralight coffees tend to shine on this brew method, and there is a very strong direct feedback loop going from how I'm roasting these coffees to how I'm tasting them with this recipe, that's then informing any changes or iterations to the roast profile that I do. One thing for certain is that for coffee to be successful with this brew method, it needs to have a lot of information in that coffee, so to speak. That means really lightly roasted coffee, and it's going to correlate usually most of the time with high TDS and high extraction yields. I want to talk about water real quick. It's becoming more and more important, and I think more and more apparent to people that having good, high quality, constructed water is paramount to getting out all of the best flavors out of a coffee and to present the inherent information in that coffee in the best possible way. For me, in this roastery, I am using 60-20 water, and that is 60 hardness, 20 buffer. The hardness is coming from magnesium sulfate, aka Epsom salt, and the buffer is coming from potassium bicarbonate. Those are my two preferred minerals. The last thing to note on water for me when I am talking about brewing is that I will list all of my brewing temps around 197 to 198 F, about 92 degrees Celsius. And that is because I am located at 7,200 feet above sea level. That's about 2,200 meters. And my boiling point is about 199 F or 93 degrees Celsius. So I am basically operating off boil. If I could go hotter, maybe I would, but this is just sort of the constraint that's put on me. And so I'm always brewing at about 197, 198, basically off boil for me. Okay, last thing to address before we actually start brewing here is the grind. I am using a Ditting 804 KR grinder, and it uses machined steel burrs. I have aligned this grinder using the marker test as well as I can, and I have my 0 point set to chirp, and my dial for this recipe is sitting at 6.5. I would say by and large, I would be looking for between 500 and 800 micron on the grind size for the majority of the grounds that are going through this recipe. So for this recipe, the Gabi standard recipe, I am talking about a 1:18 ratio that uses a 10-gram dose, 180 grams of water. I'm going to bloom 30 grams of water for about 1 minute and then simply dump the rest of my water into the top reservoir, 150 grams, and that's it. That's all I got to do. Super straightforward, incredibly repeatable. I need to take into account the amount of time it takes for the water to travel through the Gabi and to start hitting that coffee bed, which means that I start pouring my water in the top when I read about 40 seconds on my timer for the bloom, because it takes about 20 seconds for water to pass through to start hitting that bed. So taking that into account, about a full minute bloom, my total brew time is about 3 minutes and 30 seconds, give or take. I do not pay any attention to total brew time. Total brew time is an outcome of all your other variables put together. However, you can look at total brew time to help get yourself dialed in to my recipe, to what I'm trying to convey, and to the flavors that I'm trying to express through my coffees. Once you get into that range, however, I would stop looking at total brew time as being a reason to change variable and just go by taste. And then your total brew times become an outcome. I've got my dose in here, 10 grams, pre-rinse filter basket, everything's ready to go. We're teared out. I'm going to start my timer. Pour 30 grams very gently. Now, as I mentioned, I need to account for time to pass through the top here. So I'm going to put the top unit on, re-tear, make sure to re-tear. And as I come up on 40 seconds, I'm going to start pouring again. And this is the beauty of it. I'm just going to pour up to 150 grams. And that's it. I'm done. I don't need to worry about how many pours I'm doing. I don't need to do any 60-40 stuff, any 5-pour stuff. I don't need to think about if I'm over agitating on my bed. I don't need to worry about if I'm bypassing through the filter. This is all really straightforward. It's very repeatable, and you're going to get a very similar outcome every single time. I would say so repeatable, again, to emphasize that I take all of this out of the equation, and what I end up tasting down here is really just going to be about the coffee. I'm not going to think about the brew method or how I got there. All right, as this finishes up, I want to talk about expectations with this recipe. The big reason that I use this particular recipe and that I'm using such a big 1:18 ratio is because it provides a lot of flavor separation in the cup. It's going to provide a super clean cup, lots of flavor separation. I can easily distinguish the acidity, the sweetness, the body, how they hit my palate, especially the finish. I would really know exactly what kind of finish comes through on this coffee. And then finally, the faults. I'm going to really easily be able to tell all of the faults in the coffee. One real big thing I'm going to be able to tell instantly is if a coffee is overdeveloped for my liking, then there's a very easy fix for that if I want to get a better tasting cup, and that's simply to knock down the ratio. Go look at a 1:17, 1:16.5, and to coarsen up the grind a little bit. And I have an alternate recipe for that, and that tends to help a lot with coffees that I think are a little bit just more developed than I like, and which really show up quite a bit in this recipe. 151, 151. Incredible. 1.51 TDS. That is coming out to 25.54% extraction yield. On 1:18 ratio coffee, there's a lot of information in this coffee. I am brewing Lisa Seo, so we're about 6 weeks post-roast on that. That is HS Ultralight for you. When I hit those hive numbers, then I know that the roast is on the right track. Not all coffees are going to hit that high. Some coffees just aren't meant for those types of extractions, even though they might taste great in this recipe. And it just means that coffee is more subtle. On to taste. Clean. Oh, it's so clean. Beautiful coffee. This is a coffee that tastes great on this recipe. That's why I chose it. Mango, tropical fruits, and it's so clean. The flavor separation is so clear. It's very easy. I can really easily pick out that mango at the beginning. Melon-like notes in the middle, lemon drop in the finish, and very tied into the body. Super clean, super sweet, really lovely. The finish, too, is perfect on this coffee. It just sort of ends. Really nice. That's a great coffee. Okay, so that's it. That's the Gabi standard recipe. Are you using a Gabi? Are you using it like I do as any kind of an evaluation tool? I think that there's a lot of potential in using a device like the Gabi, something that's super consistent from cup to cup, to actually be used as an evaluation tool. I haven't completely replaced cupping with Gabi, but I will not make any decisions about how to iterate my roast profiles without brewing this recipe first. And I tend to do this a lot more than I am cupping lately. So what do you think of that? So that's it for now. Enjoy. I hope you enjoy the video. Let me know what you're tasting. And until next time, happy sipping.